In this session of e-Padasala, we focus on electronic waste management or e-waste management, which is an emerging issue of our current society. What are these e-waste or electronic waste, or sometimes referred to as waste electrical and electronic equipments? They are primarily the discarded or obsolete electronic products which are not fit for its original function, or it has reached its end of life, or the waste which are generated during the production of such electrical and electronic equipments. Now, primarily such waste are an issue because it contains very valuable materials. Most of the waste contains valuable materials, and at the same time it is contaminated with most toxic hazardous materials. So, it is a combination of valuable materials mixed with hazardous materials, and if you are not managing it properly, then it can lead to environmental problems as well as resource wastage issues. So, from that point of view, now the electronic waste management is gaining as an issue of concern to the society, and even in India we have the electronic waste management handling rules which has come in the year 2011, which makes mandatory for the different stakeholders to play their role so that the waste management can take place in an effective manner. So, we will see about the different issues associated with the management of this waste, and also the roles of the different stakeholders in making the waste management a sustainable manner. So, first of all, let us look at the different types of the waste. Of course, it is clear that the waste, since it is a discarded electronic products, it comes from different types of the electronic products. It could be primarily the IT and telecom equipments, or the large household equipments like a television or a refrigerator. Wherever we use an electronic circuit, such goods fall into this category. Small household appliances like a mobile phone, or a consumer lighting equipments like our lamps, electrical and electronic tools that we use, or even some of the toys, or even medical devices or monitoring and control instruments. So, we can have any electrical or electronic equipments where there is an electronic circuit, and then where we are using electronic systems, that falls into the category of e-waste. And why it is a issue? Primarily it is due to our use of such instruments and equipments is increasing. Not only that, the use is increasing, the obsolescence rate is also increasing, the product obsolescence is increasing, and on one side consumption is increasing, on the other side products becomes obsolete very faster, and as a result the quantity of such waste that is generated in the society increases. And it is also environmentally significant due to two reasons. One, it is a heavy resource loss. If you are wasting all these products and then dumping that or disposing that, then there is a loss of resources. On the other hand, the way currently such wastes are dealt, especially in the informal sector, is not taking care of the hazardous constituents which are there in such products, and such waste gets released to the environment and also cause harm to the informal recyclers. So, these are the issues that needs to be taken into consideration, and many times the public is not either aware of the issues. Most of the electronic goods that we use contains hazardous substances are not known to the public, and even the industry side also there is reluctance to inform the public or to improve the product with such electronic such hazardous materials. So, it is in this background that many of the countries have taken legal or regulatory initiatives to control such waste, primarily due to the fact that these wastes are considered as scrap products, and many times it ends up in the hands of the scrap dealers who use very unsafe methods of waste recycling, especially they burn the waste, for example wires, which inside there will be the copper wire. To extract the copper wire, they may burn the plastic. The plastic may be of PVC, and PVC if you burn, then there is a possibility of release of dioxin, which is a toxic substance, most carcinogenic substance. Even at nanogram level, this can cause cancer. And they also use very crude methods of separating materials, and during the course of time there is possibility that the heavy metals and many other toxic substances vaporize and that are inhaled by the people who are doing such operations, and also it is released to the environment in the form of leachates. For example, many times acids are used to clean the electronic circuit boards or to remove the different toxic substances, especially lead and mercury, these kind of substances which are used in the soldering and other operations or the batteries. Many times this gets washed away during the material separation process by the informal recyclers or during the burning process, and that affects them as well as once it is released to the society, it affects the overall society. So, that is the main concern in which the electronic waste management is considered as a serious issue. Now, looking at the different components of this electronic waste, we can see that the several components of the electronic products, for example, the printed board assembly that contains heavy metals in the form of lead, mercury, cadmium, arsenic. The batteries, they also contain cadmium and electrolytes, acids. Then the CRT tubes which contains lead oxide and barium, or the flame retardants which are used in the cover or the plastic materials, or even the printed circuit boards and the cables. These are all hazardous substances which gets released if it is not properly separated. That is the issue. And if you look at the magnitude of the issue in the Indian context, there were several studies. Of course, most of the studies focus on the quantity of such electronic products that is used and then their obsolescence rate, and it is estimated that by 2011 the India would have generated at least 4,70,000 tons of such waste, and there are about 10 states which generates about 70% of this waste, and the electronic waste generation is getting increased. For example, there is a study which was done in Chennai which tells that 3 sample electronic products like the personal computer, the television and the mobile phone, the average usage varies with the income level, and its average life varies from about, for a mobile phone it's about 1.5 years, and for a personal computer it's about 3 to 5 years. So, if you combine this consumption and also average life period of the products, we will be able to compute what will be the flow of such waste which will be coming, and that is how the estimates are being made. And the electronic waste management has got different dimensions. It is not just the consumer alone who is responsible. Okay, it can be primarily the producer who makes the equipment and then make it available to the consumer, and of course the consumers and the retailers or the recyclers, the formal cyclers. So, there are different dimensions starting from research, education, data management and technical assistance that is required. For example, how to design a collection system or transport system or recycling system could be one question that needs to be answered, or how we can integrate the informal recycling sector which is already existing, who are doing this for their livelihood, how they could be incorporated as part of a formal system could be a question, and how cleaner technologies could be used by the producers so that they can remove or they can minimize the use of hazardous substances in the product could be another question. How extended producer responsibility could be enforced, so that the producer is made responsible to take care of the products after its life period, could be another issues. So, these are the different issues which has to be addressed from the point of view of the economic considerations, environmental considerations and the social considerations. So, the balancing of these in the context of electronic waste management, especially in the context of electronic waste management, the economic issues and the social issue of informal recycling, the economic issue in terms of the cost of the treatment and who will pay for it. So, this there are and the environmental issues in terms of the guidelines to set up such facilities are the issues which needs to be addressed. So, let us look at the e-waste flow chain that in the society, where you can see that primarily there are several players, starting from the vendors of the electronic products, the manufacturers of the electronic products on one end, who produces such products and who comes out with new models by which the old models gets obsolete, and then promote that in the society, so that people discard their products and then goes for new products, and then accordingly the quantity of the consumption as well as the waste generation increases. On the other end, there are the different stakeholders on the recycling sector, starting from the scrap dealer, the formal dismantler, the extractors of different components, the plastic or the metal extractors or the electronic item extractors, and the end users. So, how we couple and integrate all the stakeholders in this chain, which is primarily driven by the economics. Even a consumer is interested in giving their electronic waste to a scrap dealer who may pay them some money than to a formal recycler who will require them to pay for the waste management. So, in many cases it is the economics which also plays a critical role in the waste management. And there are also several people who earn their livelihood based on the recycling of the scrap by way of collecting the waste materials or refurbishing it to make it as a reusable product, or disassemble it so that at least the components could be reused, or they recover the different components and which could be reprocessed to make new products, which at the present it is happening in an informal way, and how that informal sector could be integrated with the formal e-waste management system, where also the elements will remain the same. It is the collection, refurbishment, disassembly and material recovery. So, these are the basic elements of waste management, and how this could happen or how this could be done in a society without harming the society in terms of environmental issues, and in an acceptable manner to the society and in an affordable manner to the society is the focus. So, there are several issues. To start with, the waste collection itself could be an issue. For a waste manager, the collected waste, the quality of the collected waste, an important consideration in deciding about the cost or the waste processing. So, preserving the quality of the harvested components. There are some components which are of highly valuable, including even certain components are having even gold. So, such components could be of interest to the people, and some components which are of not value could be large in volume, but maybe that may not be of interest to the people. So, people are interested in components which are of valuable, and especially the hazardous components which are of no value is not of interest, and such components are discarded. And so, there is poor market intelligence in the form of there is only very limited information on the availability and the quality of the recyclables. So, a business person, it becomes a very risky affair to plan to set up such a facility where they are not guaranteed about the quality of the inputs and the quantity of the inputs that they get. And there is another issue of how do we share the profit among the different actors in the recycling chain, and there are also a lot of data which is stored in these electronic goods, and how the data safety, and also since many of the parts are not having adequate labeling, how do we trace this and then fix responsibility could be an issue as far as the regulatory is concerned. And there are also lack of adequate infrastructure where in a formal way the such waste could be properly dismantled or refurbished and then recycled. So, it is in this background that many countries have talked about managing such waste, applying the polluter pays principle, which means that the primarily it becomes the responsibility of the polluter, and in this case who is the polluter, whether it is the user or the producer or the recycler is always a question, and who will share the recycling cost and who will build the cat. So, it has been accepted internationally that as far as electronic goods or such white goods are concerned, ultimately it has to be the producer who is responsible, because such products are produced and then brought in the market, and that is how the issue starts. But many times it is discarded by the consumer and it is processed by the recycler. So, how the producer could be made responsible is the basic thought behind the electronic waste management principles, and there are several initiatives which has been done globally and in our country also. Right from the year 2004 there have been several studies to first understand the extent of electronic waste generation in our country. Pilot studies have been done and electronic waste management guidelines have been formulated by the Central Pollution Control Board, and culminating it in an electronic waste management handling rules of 2011. At the state level also there were separate initiatives, and e-waste management facilities have come up. For example, in Bangalore there is a electronic waste management facility called e-Parisara. There is a facility in Chennai, Trishiraya. There are several such facilities, and some state governments also have come out with policies related to management of such waste. And let us look at the electronic waste management handling rules and its requirement, because the rule itself in a comprehensive manner addresses the different issues that is to be tackled in electronic waste management. This rule is implemented from 1st of May 2012, and the different stakeholders are identified are the producer of the electronic goods, the dealers, the refurbisher, the collection centers, the consumers, which includes also the bulk consumers, the dismantlers, the recyclers and the reprocessors. And the rule also gives procedure for authorization for all these stakeholders, and there is a procedure for registration, especially for the recyclers and the collection centers, and also the authorities and their responsibilities have been identified, and that is what is there in the rule. So, first the rule has identified the waste or the products for which the rules are applicable. So, in the Indian context, the electronic waste management handling rules is applicable for the items that is listed in this rule, which is mainly the information technology and telecommunication equipments like centralized data processing, mainframes, mini computers. So, mostly computer related things, fax machines, telephones, then different types of telephones, as well as consumer electrical and electronic items like TV set, refrigerators, washing machine, air conditioners. So, these are the electrical and electronic equipments which are covered by the Indian electronic waste management handling rules. And the basic principle that is underlying this e-waste management is the waste management hierarchy in terms of reducing the waste, reusing the waste and recycling, recovering, and then ultimately recovering it. And from a reduction point of view, the first step that could be done is asking the question whether an electronic product is a must for our use, that is refusing or buying items wherever it is really required. So, which directly minimizes the generation of the waste, and consume less and by practicing simplicity and reusing something where we can use or where it serves the purpose again. And if all these options are not feasible, then think of recycling and recovering. So, the first three, the refusal or reducing and recycling, it is to be done by the individual users or the consumers. And when it comes to the recycling and recovery, maybe it could be the formal recycler who can play a role in then. So, the rule identifies the primary responsibility with the producer who is producing such electronic goods, and as we have seen, the main issue in the such electronic waste is one, the valuable materials, and other is the hazardous substances. So, if the producer can produce goods with or without the restricted hazardous substances, then the all waste will become only valuable materials and which could be easily recycled. So, keeping that in mind, the rule expects that the producer make efforts to reduce the use of hazardous substances, restricted organic hazardous substances, ROHs, and they apply an extended producer responsibility for the end of life waste, which means they should be able to identify the products which they are releasing into the market, and they become responsible to get back the product after its end of life and then manage it in an environmentally sound manner, that is without harm to the society. So, they should ensure collection of the e-waste that is generated during the manufacture, provide all electrical and electronic equipments with a unique serial number, channelizing such waste through a registered refurbisher or a dismantler, and they should also set up collection centers or take back system either individually or collectively, so that whatever products they are released to the market are tracked back, collected, and then it reaches safe hands, by which it is separated into different components which could be used by them again for manufacturing new goods. Now, regarding the restriction on the use of hazardous substances, there are some timelines and limits prescribed. Every producer of such equipment which are listed in the schedule 1, they should ensure that the new electrical and electronic items which they are releasing is not containing certain hazardous substances like lead, mercury, cadmium, hexavalent chromium, polybrominated biphenyls, polybrominated diphenyls, etc. The concentration of such substances they has to be limited to about 0.1% by weight in homogeneous materials and 0.01% by weight in homogeneous materials for cadmium. So, they need to make steps to look into the different elements which goes into the production of these materials or the components, and then takes steps or R&D to see that such hazardous substances are eliminated from the product. They can adopt the strategy of design for environment. How they can eliminate this product? It could be through following strategies, either by finding out substitute for hazardous substances which needs to be eliminated, or eliminating substances itself, for example certain paints and the dyes which can contaminate could be eliminated, or switching over to other substances alternatives like for example an organic solvent could be replaced with water based solvents, especially paints, or labeling of materials so that they could be able to be traced and then identified even by the other stakeholders in the chain, or use of metals in preference to plastics, because the plastics is what contains either brominated flame retardants or chlorinated materials, which when it is burnt it releases the dioxins. So, these are some of the strategies which could be used, and there is also possibility of standardizing the components and minimizing the number of connections, so that dismantling becomes easy, and also encouragement on promoting green procurement for the corporate buyers. So, from the producer side, several initiatives are required, mainly focusing on minimizing the hazardous components in their product, and they are also being responsible for the extended producer responsibility point of view to collect the waste and also the process the waste. So, from that point of view, there are several collection options, but primarily the producer take back schemes, the producer to pay the consumer. Now, to pay the consumer, maybe the producer will charge the consumer initially while selling the product, and then part of that could be returned when the consumer returns the electronic product. That kind of strategy is what is envisaged in the extended producer responsibility. So, by which the producer itself either operates their own collection centers or franchises collection centers, and then apply a reverse logistics principle by which they collect the different goods, ensuring the quality and tracking the products which they have sold in the market, so that they will be able to finance and organize such systems, meet the cost of such systems, and of course, all these costs may be passed on to the producer by the passed on to the consumer by the producer, depending upon the market demands for the products. So, it is basically the economics that will decide who will ultimately bear the cost, either the producer or the consumer, but the law expects that it is the producer who has to take the initiative and then do it. If they are able to pass on the cost to the consumer, then that they can do it, there is no restriction on that. They are also required to create awareness on this, so that the consumers are aware what to do with the electronic gadgets once it becomes obsolete, and they are also required to get authorization from the State Pollution Control Board, maintain records, and they are also required to file returns, so that centrally there will be a database on such goods released to the market and such goods that is collected from the market. Since the producers are not directly selling their products, it is sold through the dealers. The dealers are also considered as a party to help the producers in implementing the requirements of this rule. So, the rule identifies some responsibilities for the dealers in terms of collecting the e-waste by providing the consumers a box or a bin or a demarcated area to deposit the waste, and all the dealers should get a one-time registration with the State Pollution Control Boards. They are also required to submit how much e-waste they have collected. They need to safely transport the collected waste either back to the producer or to the centers which are authorized by the State Pollution Control Boards, and then maintain records. So, if they are selling a product, they should ensure that they are also collecting back products, and then maybe at a point it will be required that they should get back an equal number of products or quantity of products that they sell in the form of e-waste which they collect. Now, the collected waste can be refurbished, means it can be converted into it can be repaired, and then maybe can give a new life to the product, which is done by the refurbisher. So, they are also recognized as another party where the channelized the electronic waste that they generate during this repair or maintenance or refurbishing process, which they are required to channelize it to the authorized collection centers, and they also require registration from the State Pollution Control Boards, and they are also required to safely transport such waste to the authorized collection centers. The collection centers are authorized agencies authorized by the State Pollution Control Boards. Anybody can get, subject to meeting the specifications or requirements of the State Pollution Control Board. Primarily, they are required to store the collected waste in a secured manner, safely transport such waste, and maintain records and file annual returns regarding what waste they have collected. So, time being such waste being collected by the scrap dealers of the informal sectors, now hereafter it needs to be collected by a formal sector, or maybe the informal people itself could be converted into a formal sector and they can be made to be part of the collection job, but it needs to be formalized and there has to be a record of how much waste is being collected, and for the people to deposit the waste maybe they will have to be paid, which the producer can organize with the collection centers and then do it. Now, the consumer or the bulk consumers, their responsibility to deposit the waste with the dealer or the authorized collection centers, and bulk consumers have to also see that when they are auctioning such waste, they should authorize, they should auction it only to authorized vendors, or they may deposit it with authorized collection centers. And bulk consumers are also required to file annual returns regarding how much of electronic goods they have used, how much has become waste, and then how they have disposed such waste. So, there is a well managed database that is being thought of as part of this e-waste management handling rules. Now, the dismantler, they also needs to get authorization from the Pollution Control Board. As far as the dismantler is concerned, it is the Central Pollution Control Board who will do the authorization. In all other cases, it was the State Pollution Control Board. So, the dismantlers are nationally authorized to collect the waste, who are required to safely store such waste, transport the waste, and then dismantle the different components adhering to the standards. The Central Pollution Control Board has come out with guidelines for electronic waste management, which specifies the standards that are required for a dismantling facility and also the recovery facility, and the dismantled components can be sent to authorized treatment facilities. So, which goes to the last level of the e-waste management chain, who are also required to get authorization from the Central Pollution Control Board and follow the requirements and the guidelines and maintain records and then file returns. And the Central Pollution Control Board will do the overall coordination among the state pollution control boards, come out with the guidelines based on which the authorization could be done by the CPCB as well as the SPCB, and the overall database management for the country will be done by the CPCB. The state pollution control boards will be responsible for implementation of the rule in the respective states in terms of first having an inventory of such waste, granting and renewal of authorization to the different stakeholders, maintain information and conditions imposed for authorization, registration and monitoring of the e-waste recyclers who are there in that respective states, and also take actions when there is some violation regarding the requirements takes place. To summarize, we can see that electronic waste management involves different stakeholders whose actions needs to be integrated, then only the electronic waste management can happen in a sustainable manner. Primarily it is the regulatory agency in the form of the government and the e-waste management agency who can take a central role in this, and as per our regulatory system it is the Central Pollution Control Board and the State Pollution Control Board, and then on the other side it is the manufacturers, the assemblers and the recycling centers, the collection centers and the consumers. Each of them have got their own responsibilities, and the rule has identified what is the minimum that is expected from these different stakeholders, and if that is done properly, then maybe such electronic waste, which is an emerging issue for the our present society, could be tackled in a sustainable manner. And when we as a consumer of such goods or a planner of facilities where such goods are being used, when we plan such facilities, it is important that we also think of facilitation or supports that is required. at least for a building or a house which an architect or is planning, they should think of at least facilities to store the waste in a segregated manner, and the special bins and the storage space for electronic goods or e-waste storage till it is handed over to the authorized collection center or the recycling center is a minimum requirement that needs to be planned as part of any building or the building that is planned by an architect. And also develop capability for environmental friendly recycling amongst the informal sectors. This is another aspect that the society has to do, create awareness. So, I hope this session on electronic waste management would have been useful to at least create awareness among all of you regarding the different dimensions associated with electronic waste, which is primarily valuable materials which is combined with hazardous materials, and how that is currently managed in the society, especially in the informal sector, is causing harm to different stakeholders in the society, but that could be managed properly provided we adhere to the requirements envisaged in the electronic waste management handling rules. And keep in mind that the electronic goods that we use contains hazardous substances, and once its life is over, it is a requirement for us to return it to the safe hands so that the components are separated and the hazardous substances are taken care by knowledgeable people in a organized manner. Thank you very much.